Amazing Grandma's 30-year journey, discover the incredible, touching story of unexpected rebirth. Ruth Johnson hadn't felt her heart race in decades, not since the days of chasing after toddlers and keeping bedtime stories flowing. But there she was, alone in her late husband's workshop on a drizzly afternoon, the air heavy with nostalgia and a sense of unearthing something monumental. As she dusted off an old box, the scent of aged paper filled her lungs, igniting a spark of curiosity that she hadn't felt in years. The letters inside, penned in delicate cursive, whispered tales of love, betrayal, and a family legacy long buried under resentment. As she absorbed the words, her heart thrummed, for they revealed a long-abandoned property, one that promised a hidden treasure but was marred by discord. Her hands trembled as she read each line, unearthing details of a family feud that had split her lineage in two, a fracture she had never known existed. An unwelcome tide of emotions washed over Ruth: betrayal, indignation, but also a blossoming excitement. She realized that the legacy of her family was not just a painful past but a glimmer of hope for a future she had yet to grasp. Encased in these letters was the key to a life beyond her role as matriarch, a personal ambition she stifled under the weight of familial obligations. When she shared her discovery, she expected encouragement, a thrill of adventure. Instead, their dismissive tones rang in her ears, her children's faces hardening against her enthusiasm. "Mom, don't you think it's time to let these things go?" her elder son challenged, the frustration clear in his voice. "The property is a mess, it's a lot of work. Just let it be." Their skepticism created a growing sense of unease within her, her resolve tearing at the seams. She felt like a solitary ship caught in a storm, yearning for the shore of support only to be met with waves of doubt crashing down around her. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. But even in the midst of their cynicism, a flicker of determination ignited deep within her. Ruth recalled the countless times she had put aside her own needs for the sake of her family. A new realization struck her: she had the power to reclaim her dreams. But with that power came a cascade of emotions: fear of failure, concern for her children's opinions, and a deep-rooted urge to safeguard her family's legacy without ripping them apart further. Just as she steeled herself for a new beginning, a revelation pierced through her thoughts: her late husband had been a key player in the feud that had torn their family apart. The history she cherished now felt tainted with deceit, and anguish squeezed her heart like a vice. Would she do the unthinkable? Forgive the sins tied to a man she loved while grappling with the future of her family? Torn between reclaiming her ambition and preserving familial peace, Ruth stood at a daunting crossroads, unaware of which path would lead her towards healing. As the storm continued to rage outside, it mirrored the tempest within, leaving her haunted by questions that echoed into the silence. Could she find the courage to forge ahead, or would the weight of those letters bury her dreams forever? The rain continued its relentless patter against the workshop windows, mimicking the turmoil dancing in Ruth's mind. Each droplet felt like a reminder of the barriers she faced: her family's disdain, her husband's shadow, and the daunting task of revisiting a story steeped in bitterness. The letters folded carefully in her hands were more than just paper, they were a lifeline to a world that was hers to reclaim. With newfound resolve, she decided to take the first step. Ruth cleared her throat, a signal to the hesitant voice within her to rise above the doubts. The old map nestled among the letters called to her, with its lines and markings hinting at an adventure that could redefine her existence. Where it marked the forgotten property, she envisioned a place of rebirth, a sanctuary away from the suffocating expectations of motherhood and the sting of betrayal. Yet, the competing voices in her head questioned her readiness. Could I really manage it? She asked herself, squaring her shoulders. Am I capable of carrying this weight? The questions fiendishly echoed. But each resolution ignited within her an urgent resolve to prove not just to her children but to herself that she could become the architect of her own destiny. Ruth moved with purpose, gathering a notebook and a pen, intending to sketch out her next steps. This wasn't merely a project, it was a pathway toward her identity beyond familiar labels: mother, grandma, the relentless caretaker. As the pen flowed on paper, she mapped out a strategy for how she would approach the property with care, understanding, and perhaps a little bravado. Listing the tasks, she felt the panic ebbing as her dreams turned into tangible goals. The idea of confronting her past soon became intertwined with the concept of forgiveness. Was it possible to honor those who had caused harm while moving forward with her life? The thought lingered like a specter, and she knew it wouldn't vanish by ignoring it. Instead, Ruth understood she might need to confront the real sources of discord, her husband's legacy and the feud that haunted her bloodline. The letters could illuminate her way, but they might also expose wounds better left concealed. With each task she wrote down first with enthusiastic strokes, then with the weight of doubt. Ruth found clarity. Taking control of the property would require more than a mere cleanup. It called for discussions, for reaching out to estranged family members who had sought to distance themselves from the legacy her husband left behind. She realized bringing closure to one chapter meant she had to honestly engage with the others entwined in the story. Just as she began to feel empowered, Ruth received a call from an unknown number. A knot tightened in her stomach. She hesitated but answered, the tension palpable in the air around her. Is this Ruth Johnson? Asked a voice on the other end, firm yet bearing an undercurrent of something she couldn't place. Yes, it is, she replied cautiously. Your family is ready to discuss the property. The statement hung in the air, a precipice demanding her immediate response. Ruth's heart raced anew, caught between the excitement of opportunity and the ominous promise of confrontation. Would this be her chance to unfold her narrative amidst the chaos? Or would it invite waves of conflict that she feared? The intensity of the moment curved her spine, a reminder that she stood on the threshold of change, but change always came with a price. What lay ahead, with the past ready to resurface, mystified her. Ruth knew she was teetering on the edge, and the choice she now faced could define her journey irrevocably. Would she step away from the fear and into the unknown? The rain intensified, mirroring the erratic rhythm of her thoughts as she pondered her answer. Ruth inhaled sharply, the air thick with anticipation, as if every breath made the weight of her decision heavier. Setting her jaw, she wrestled with the possibilities unraveling in her mind. The very idea of facing her family, of standing toe-to-toe with the ghosts of her past, sent tremors of doubt rattling down her spine, yet deep down, she knew this was not just a confrontation. It was an awakening, a chance to reclaim her agency. She set her phone down, the call now an echo in her mind, while her fingers tapped restlessly against the table. The map, once an object of nostalgia, now shimmered with renewed clarity, its faded lines urging her toward a future built on reclaimed heritage. The property held stories, yes, but more pressing, it held the potential for generational reconciliation, dreams yet unrealized, and a chance for her to end the cycle of silence. Ruth's fingers found the pen again, and she moved swiftly, jotting down questions she needed answers to, questions that would lead to breakthroughs. What had buried the family feud? Which relatives still believed in the legacy she could revive? As a newfound spark ignited in her chest, she felt a shift, a determination that was different this time. No longer reactive, her resolve transformed into proactive engagement. The thought of reaching out to estranged family members ignited a mix of fear and excitement. Who would respond with understanding? Who might reject her attempts like she was nothing more than her husband's widow? The familiar pang of self-doubt threatened to undermine her, but she countered it with the voices of women before her, strong, resilient voices she wanted to channel. Later that day, Ruth took to her workshop once more, the rain now a calming backdrop, creating a peaceful rhythm that mirrored her focus. With her notebook positioned like a pilot's manual, she began drafting messages to family members, crafting a bridge over the chasm that had divided them. As she typed, Ruth uncovered a hidden talent. She wasn't just communicating, she was rediscovering how to connect with honesty and vulnerability. "This is what I needed all along," she whispered to herself, realizing that the act of writing became a tool for her growth. She felt the tremors of doubt begin to recede as the messages transformed from simple phrases into empowering invitations. The thought of rekindling these connections felt like unearthing treasures long thought lost. Yet with resolution came a weight. How would she manage the responses? The community of her family was a tangled web of loyalty and resentment. The anticipation of rejection gnawed at her, but Ruth was armed with one vital realization: the fear of their reactions was no longer her anchor. Now, she was building a new identity, one not defined by her past, but by her choices. Ruth pressed send on the last message, her heart racing with both elation and terror. What if they turned her world upside down again? What if the weight of anger and bitterness proved too great to surmount? She leaned back in her chair, the storm outside easing, illuminating her resolve. She reminded herself why she ventured into this: the need for closure, for rewriting her narrative, for building a life beyond the limitations imposed upon her. The letters had hinted at wounds, yes, but they also spoke of healing. As dust settled over the horizon, Ruth felt the flicker of hope ignite within. Change was indeed a price, but it was a cost she wanted to pay. She stood, looking at the map adorned with the paths of her past, their significance gaining new life in the light of her intentions. Suddenly, a thought struck her, sharp as a lightning bolt. Would reconciling with her kin drive her back to the very conflict she sought to escape? A wave of anxiety surged as she pondered the crux of her journey. The call had opened a door, but would stepping through plunge her into turmoil? Ruth closed her eyes, steeling herself for the answer. In this dance with the past, she realized he had to find not just her voice, but establish the kind of dialogue that might finally lead to reconciliation and healing. As night descended, Ruth breathed in deeply, every exhale mingled with both anticipation and trepidation. The time had come to confront not only her family, but the chains binding her. With renewed determination, she turned to her desk, resolute in her plans for the next few days. Little did she know, the secrets she would unveil during this encounter could change everything, propelling her into realms of discovery she never thought possible. And with that thought anchored in her mind, Ruth picked up her pen once more, ready to carve out her path forward. What awaited on the other side of her family's acceptance? Only time would tell as she ventured into the murky depths of her familiar legacy to seek light, her own rebirth. As the sun crept into the early morning sky, casting a soft glow over her workspace, Ruth tackled the day with a growing sense of purpose. The stillness of dawn wrapped around her like a comforting cloak, yet her heart thudded in her chest, echoing the unresolved questions still brewing within her. The flurry of messages she had sent out yesterday felt like a leap into the unknown, but each heartbeat reminded her of her commitment to the future she was crafting for herself. She turned to her notebook again, its pages now filled with reflections, plans, and half-formed ideas. Today, she decided, she would sketch out what steps she might take next, regardless of how her family decided to respond. With every line she drew, her path felt more defined, the fog of uncertainty starting to lift. There was beauty in creating her own roadmap, unbound by the histories that once constrained her. Focus, she murmured under her breath, placing the pencil against the paper to draw a flowchart. The first step, as she envisioned, would be to reconnect with the family members she believed would be open to dialogue. She listed names, prioritizing those whom she thought might harbor the most hope for reconciliation. Ruth's pulse quickened at the notion of opening avenues, vulnerable yet resolute. As she worked, an underlying apprehension continued to gnaw at her. What if they questioned her intentions? What if they remained entrenched in their grievances? The ethical implications of her actions surged. She thought she was ready, but doubts resurfaced like unwelcome weeds amidst her resolve. Ruth set the pencil down, shaking her head in frustration. Stop second-guessing. You have every right to be here, to seek this, she scolded herself. In that moment, a historical figure floated to mind: her grandmother. The stories she had heard, how her grandmother had faced wrenching loss, yet still forged paths of love and connection in her own family. Ruth's heart fluttered with inspiration. She needed to embody that same courage. Carving out time to reflect in her workshop now felt integral to her process. Each chisel tap against wood morphed into a rhythmic meditation, a counterbalance to the chaos within. As she sculpted, a revelation struck: what if she infused her artistry with the essence of her journey? Could she channel emotions through her work, weaving her stories into each piece she shaped? The thought ignited a spark of creativity, shifting her perspective from fear to possibility. Art had always been her solace, and using it as a medium to express her struggles and triumphs could deepen her connection to both herself and her family. With each stroke, she resolved to craft not just beautiful objects, but dialogues visible in texture and form, a way to encapsulate her hopes for reconciliation. With a renewed sense of purpose, Ruth made a mental note: she must organize her creations, perhaps hosting a small gathering that highlighted her work as a narrative of resilience. It would be a platform to softly introduce her family's stories, bridging old wounds with newfound understanding and collective healing. As the day rolled towards evening, and shadows began to lengthen, Ruth turned her attention back to her phone. Despite the anxiety looming over her, she opened the messaging app, ready to check for notifications from her family. Her heart raced as she needed to remind herself she had taken the first leap. Anxious anticipation shivered through her fingertips as she scrolled. Only one response awaited her: a brief message from an estranged cousin. The words seemed harmless, yet were heavy with implications, inviting questions to surface. "I'd like to chat. It's time we talked." Ruth stared at the screen, exhilarated yet terrified. This could be the moment she'd long been waiting for, or a fan to the fire of past resentment. She swallowed hard, crossing a threshold as she typed back, "Yes, I'd like that. Let's set a time." Did she dare to hope? Within moments, reality felt layered with complexity, and she could feel the undercurrents of her choice swirling. Was she ready for what lay ahead? The time had come, she realized, not just to confront her family, but to navigate the complexities of her own desires for both connection and autonomy. What revelations awaited in her cousin's story, and would they throw her on the path she feared or toward one she yearned for even more? Each moment surged with tension, whispers of the past mingling with promises of the future. Ruth's journey was only beginning, and now more than ever, she could feel the weight of potential all around her, ready to unfold. What awaited her on the other side of the conversation? The real test of her resolve was only just beginning. Ruth woke the next day with an urgency that shot through her like a jolt of electricity. The conversation with her cousin was looming, a predetermined appointment etched into her calendar, but suddenly, everything about it felt daunting. She rolled out of bed, trying to shake off the remnants of her night's sleep, feeling the weight of anticipation pressing against her chest. In the workshop, surrounded by the scent of sawdust and fresh wood, she fought against the bubbling anxiety. Each stroke of her chisel felt instrumental, a distraction that both calmed and illuminated her mind. The piece now taking shape, a gnarled tree with outstretched branches, echoed her own quest for growth amidst the knots and scars of her family history. Each carved curve represented a story, and each downward stroke encapsulated the pain of disconnection she had felt for so long. The artwork morphed into a cathartic exercise, the act of creation was transforming into a dialogue with herself. But this new sense of artistry brought about questions she had not yet faced. Who was she to think she could mend familial fissures simply by sharing her work? What if her family continued down their path of resentment, unwilling to see beyond their own pain? Ruth paused, feeling the weight of self-doubt creeping in. Was she prepared for the emotional fallout if things went awry? Yet she knew she had to push through the discomfort. The thought of approaching her cousin felt like standing at the edge of a precipice, looking down into the unknown. Ruth's determination stiffened. This was not merely a conversation, it was a step toward asserting her identity and reclaiming her voice. As her chisel bit deeper into wood, she felt the resolve building within her. She lifted her hands, stained with wood shavings, to check her phone. The time was drawing near. The space around her shifted, the anticipation turning electric. Her cousin's usual calm demeanor carried a weight that had never been part of their interactions before. Did she even want to blend her artistry with family discussions? Could her creations convey the sentiments she felt simmering just beneath the surface? Ruth felt an inner surge of conflicting emotions, a need for connection, but also a need for independence, as if she stood at a crossroads where each path could lead to a vastly different outcome. As she set the chisel down, a thought struck her like a light bulb flickering to life. What if she decided to bring a piece of her work into the conversation? Would it serve as a tangible representation of her feelings, a prop that could breach the vast spaces between them? She envisioned her wood sculpture as an offering, something tactile for her cousin to hold onto, a visual cue that could foster understanding, or at least a moment of vulnerability. She worked feverishly, carving out the final details before the hour of reckoning arrived. The tree stood proud, strong yet weathered, much like her own family. Would her cousin see the parallels, the potential for healing? The intricacies of the grain whispered stories of resilience and rebirth, the essence of her grandmother woven into the piece alongside her own intentions. As Ruth placed the final touch to the sculpture, her hands trembled with exhilaration. She understood that vulnerability was not weakness, it was an invitation for honesty. It was time to put her plans into action, to face not only her family but also the shadows within her. The moment of truth was upon her. How would her cousin respond to the stories embedded in the wood? Would her creation evoke empathy or push them further apart? Ruth stepped toward uncertainty, heart racing, bracing herself for the cascade of emotions that awaited her. As she prepared to leave her workshop, the sculpture cradled in her arms, Ruth took a deep breath. This was it, the crossing of thresholds. How would she navigate this territory, where hope and fear coexisted in tumultuous harmony? And what revelations awaited her on the other side of the door? Ruth stepped outside, the cool air brushing against her skin, a stark contrast to the warmth of her workshop. The sunlight flickered through the trees, casting playful shadows that mirrored her conflicted emotions. Each step felt heavy, her heart thudding like a drum as she approached the familiar path leading to her cousin's home. As she walked, she reviewed her mental checklist. Share her art, express her feelings, listen. Yet the uncertainty loomed larger than the assurance she had tried to build. What words would breach the silence that had gathered over the years like dust settling on forgotten memories? The fragile sculpture she clutched was not merely wood, it was a vessel carrying the weight of her longing for connection. Arriving at her cousin's doorstep, Ruth hesitated. A twinge of doubt rippled through her. Would her offering resonate, or would it rehash old grievances? She gathered her breath and knocked, each sound echoing in the still air. Her cousin opened the door, his expression neutral but his eyes searching, as if weighing the significance of the moment. Ruth forced a smile, though inside she felt a tempest brewing. "Hey, it's good to see you," he said, gripping the door frame, as if reluctant to fully welcome her in. "Thanks for meeting with me." Ruth stepped forward, lifting the sculpture slightly, the branches stretching upward as if seeking acceptance. I brought something I'd like to share with you. A flicker of curiosity crossed his face, melding with the weight of apprehension. They settled at the small dining table, the wooden surface familiar but now laden with tension. Ruth placed the sculpture between them. This is a tree and it represents our family. Her voice faltered but steadied. The gnarled branches and scars are part of its story, just like ours are. His gaze flicked over the piece, absorbing the contours and textures she had painstakingly carved. Silence stretched, thickening the air. She watched his brows furrow, searching for a sign of recognition. I didn't realize you had taken this up, he murmured, tracing a finger along the sculpture's surface. It's different. Ruth's heart sank momentarily. Different? Was that all it was? Yet, she felt a surge of determination. It's about healing, about growth despite everything that has happened between us. I want us to talk. To really connect. The words hung between them, barbed and hopeful. His expression shifted, the walls of reticence he had erected beginning to crack. You know it's not easy for me to, he paused, glancing away as if the admission pained him. Trust me, I understand. Ruth leaned in, her voice softer, infused with urgency. But we have to start somewhere. I can't keep pretending that everything is fine when it's not. The pause that followed felt like an eternity, her heart racing as she wrestled with her vulnerability. Would he engage with her, or would he retreat into the safety of old resentments? Suddenly, something clicked in her mind. This was not just about her needing a connection, it was about both of them facing hard truths. Let us not dance around it, she continued. Our family has faced so much pain, but that doesn't mean we should hide from each other. This tree, she gestured emphatically, is about nurturing what can still grow even in the shadows of hurt. His eyes held hers, the retreat of defensive silence replaced with a glimmer of openness. You're right. I've been so guarded. It's just protective, you know. Ruth nodded, realizing that the battle she faced was not solely against her own fears but against his instinct to shield himself from past wounds. We can confront this together. As they spoke, sudden revelations emerged. They began peeling back layers of misunderstanding, the conversation evolving into something raw yet essential. With each word exchanged, Ruth felt fragments of her own anxiety dissolve, replaced by a burgeoning sense of agency. In that moment of mutual vulnerability, she noticed a shift. This wasn't merely about her art, it was giving both of them permission to exist free of judgment. But as they began to delve deeper into their family's legacy, a disquiet surged through her thoughts. Where would they go from here? What truths might surface that could either forge a bond or deepen the already complex rift? The path ahead unfolded with promise and peril. Would they continue to confront their shared histories, or would the former barriers rise again? Ruth felt the weight of impending answers, and tucked within her heart was a burgeoning hope that perhaps, just perhaps, they could emerge reconciled. Yet deeper waters lay ahead, and as they reached the crux of their conversation, an unexpected detail surfaced that threatened to shift everything Ruth thought she understood about her family. She braced herself, accepting the emotional turbulence swirling around them. The time had come to face the truth of her grandmother's legacy, and it might change everything. Ruth felt the room tighten around her as the words slipped from her cousin's lips, the air electric with the weight of the revelation. What do you mean by her grandmother's legacy? She tried to mask the rising trepidation, but her heart raced. This was territory she had unknowingly skirted. The history of their family, once a mere background hum in her consciousness, suddenly pulsed to life, demanding attention. It's something you might not know, he continued, a mix of reticence and urgency flickering in his eyes. Our grandmother had her own struggles, her own art, a vision she desperately fought for. But she never emerged from the shadows of her own fears. There are things she left unsaid, things that shaped the family we have now. Ruth's mind reeled. The idea of her grandmother as a creative soul battling unseen forces resonated with her own recent journey. As she sat frozen, contemplating the connections between their experiences, a flicker of anger surged. How had this narrative been withheld from her? For years, they had both failed to acknowledge the art of their ancestry, and now it was as if a curtain had drawn back, revealing long-hidden truths. Why didn't anyone talk about this? She asked, her own voice heavy with frustration. Her pain could have informed our stories, helped us make sense of our own struggles. I suppose we were all too lost in our own lives to look back, he admitted, running a hand through his hair. But I think it's time we explore that past. Not just for her but for us. It was the proposition that held both promise and peril. Ruth's heart fluttered as she felt the weight of ambition begin to settle in her stomach. Here was a chance to rewrite the narrative of her family, to reclaim a legacy she had never truly known. As she considered the implications, her mind shifted to her art, the sculpture still resting like a silent mediator between them. It suddenly dawned on her that revealing this part of their identity could become a healing act, a new sculpture to mold. It was not just about unveiling history, it was also about crafting a new bond based on truth and collective healing. What if we took this further? She proposed cautiously. What if we collaborated? You know about the family stories, I have the craft. If we could combine those elements, we might be able to truly understand our grandmother, and in doing so, help ourselves. He blinked, a spark igniting in his eyes as the thought took root. But just as quickly, doubts clouded his expression. Ruth, that's a big step. Are we prepared to dig up those old wounds? What if the legacy we uncover is filled with sadness? Those questions hovered ominously. Could they unearth truths that had the power to heal, or might they inadvertently reignite dormant pain? Yet, sitting here in this moment, embracing vulnerability as they had, felt empowering. We may face sadness, but isn't it more painful to be shackled to silence? Let us face this together. Let us create something that honors her, something authentic. As she spoke, Ruth felt a new determination unfurling within her. Each syllable was a step towards her own empowerment, merging her identity as an artist with that of someone willing to confront painful truths openly. This endeavor could become a catalyst for not just self-discovery but a reclamation of a shared heritage. His gaze steadied, resolutely locking onto hers. Okay. Let us do this, then. For her, for us. But we need to approach it carefully. Their agreement felt monumental, a pivotal moment that brought warmth to the chill of unresolved tension. Still, in the back of her mind, an ember of fear flickered. Are they truly equipped for what they were about to uncover? Just as excitement surged through Ruth, anticipation took its place alongside the unease. They were on the precipice of something vast. As they began to sketch out plans, her thoughts spiraled back to the legacy of their grandmother. What struggles had she faced? What had she hidden in the neat lines of her life? Questions sparked more questions, a web of inquiry that could ensnare or liberate. As they began discussing the logistics, a sense of unease gripped her once more. There was an urgency in her heart. What if this delve into the past unearthed secrets better left buried? That lingering doubt was pierced by a sudden thought. What if they stumbled upon a truth so profound it changed everything they thought they understood about their family? That possibility loomed larger than any fear. And as that thought settled, Ruth could feel the wind of change at her back, ready to carry her forward as they dared to confront the unfolding truths of a legacy intertwined with their own longing for rebirth. The path they chose would likely lead to uncharted territories, but together, they were ready to navigate it. Let us meet tomorrow to begin this journey, he proposed, a hint of excitement dancing in his voice. But in the depths of her heart, a lingering question caused a shiver. As her anticipation crescendoed, so did a powerful realization that sometimes, the past holds knowledge that can shape the future in unimaginable ways. Soon, they would learn exactly how deep these revelations ran and how profoundly they would affect their lives. The following morning, Ruth awoke to a gray, overcast sky that mirrored the tumult in her heart. The omnipresent weight of anticipation had seeped into her bones, each ticking minute heightening the mental storm brewing inside her. She stared at the ceiling, the intricate swirls of paint reminiscent of her own tangled thoughts, complex, layered, and difficult to decipher. The sun remained hidden, but Ruth felt a flicker of light within, sparking her resolve anew. She pulled herself from the tangle of blankets and headed to her studio, where clay awaited, malleable and forgiving. As she sat down at her workbench, she understood that today was not just about creating art, it was about channeling emotions, unearthing truths, a cathartic confrontation with her own fears regarding the past she was about to delve into with her cousin. With every push and pull of her hands, she thought of her grandmother. How she had molded not only clay but her own identity amidst the shadows of fear and doubt. Something deep within Ruth stirred as she crafted, the wet clay becoming both a medium and a mirror. What deeper stories were waiting to be uncovered? What legacy's weight had been carried by her grandmother? Judging by the intensity of her current feelings, Ruth had to believe that buried beneath all of that familial silence lay not only pain but also wisdom, inspiration, and possibly beauty. She realized that she could harness this energy, transform it from fear into fuel. The thought sent a bolt of determination coursing through her. She was not just an observer in her family's narrative, she was a creator, and that was powerfully liberating. By sculpting their past, she could give form to the formless, a tangible reminder that the stories they carried could be reshaped and honored. As the hours passed, time melted away, the outside world fading into the background. The sculpture took shape, each curve and edge reflecting her burgeoning commitment to her family's journey. Her hands moved instinctively, and in those moments, she took on the role of both artist and historian. A weight lifted as she paid homage to the struggles of a woman who had once stood in a similar position of uncertainty. Was that what art was, a dialogue across generations? When the clock chimed, Ruth jolted back to reality, suddenly aware of the time. Her cousin would be arriving soon, and a knot of anxiety tightened in her stomach. They had decided to connect not only to explore the past but to find a way to infuse it into their current lives, and now she faced the moment they had both agreed was essential. After a quick shower, Ruth dressed with intention, reaching for colors and textures that felt like echoes of her aspirations. Wasn't it fitting to embody creativity, even within the mundane rhythm of meeting? The doorbell rang too soon, a sharp reminder that they had entered a pact grounded in both potential and peril. As she opened the door, a rush of conflicting emotions swept over her, excitement twined with dread. Her cousin stood there, a bundle of notebooks and sketches clutched firmly in his arms, his face a mask of determination. He too was ready to embark on this journey. Yet the moment she met his gaze, a silent acknowledgement passed between them. They both knew that some truths might be harder to bear than they'd anticipated. "What do we do first?" he asked, stepping into her space, and in that moment, Ruth recognized a shared mission, a bridge between their past and the future they aimed to create. "We start with the stories," Ruth said, steeling herself. "Let us put everything we have on the table." As they settled into the comfortable chaos of brainstorming, paragraphs of unfinished narratives, and half-formed ideas swirled in the air. With each passing moment, they ventured deeper into the unknown where their grandmother's legacy awaited. But would they be prepared for the truths awaiting discovery? Ruth felt the air thicken with unspoken fears, the potential pain shifting beneath the surface like a trapped river, yearning to break free. What if we uncover something that changes our view of her entirely? The words hung in the air, heavy with implications. Their resolve steadied as they began to untangle the stories, yet Ruth couldn't shake the sensation that they had just opened a portal into a past marked by both resilience and heartache. With every word, they were not just recounting family history, they were excavating their fears, painting vivid layers of their shared identity and experiences. And as the afternoon stretched on, she wondered, how deep would this journey take them? Would they come out on the other side transformed, or would they find themselves submerged in revelations that would shift the very foundation of their understanding? The afternoon shadows lengthened as Ruth and her cousin dove into their dialogue, a blend of excitement and trepidation threading through their exchanges. As she watched him scribble fervently in his notebook, she struggled to set aside her own uncertainties. They exchanged snippets of memory, reliving their shared childhood sensations intertwined with the faint echoes of their grandmother's wisdom. Yet, the deeper they dug, the more unease lurked beneath the surface, like the clay beneath her fingertips, a material full of promise, yet equally complex and resistant. "Let us outline what we know," her cousin suggested, looking up with a keen intensity that made Ruth admire his determination. He formulated questions, sketches morphing to life that highlighted milestones in their grandmother's life they had once taken for granted. This was progress, yet the air felt charged, teetering on the edge of revelation. With every story he unearthed, Ruth could feel distant shadows stretching. "What about the stories we don't know?" she asked, her voice suddenly tremulous. Like the family secrets she may have kept hidden. The looming silence swallowed her words. They were two explorers in a vast wilderness, and the fears of encountering something they couldn't unsee danced like dry leaves caught in the wind. Her cousin met her gaze, hesitation flickering in his eyes. "Maybe that is part of what we need to discover," he replied softly, a mix of apprehension and conviction. Was he willing to tread the ground where honesty could shatter their idyllic memories? The stakes felt high, the potential for disillusionment almost palpable. "Okay," she agreed, her heart pounding. "Let us not shy away from the hard truths." This wasn't just about recounting tales, it was an excavation of reality, unearthing the complexities beneath the nostalgia. Clarifying what legacy was being passed on, and whether it reinforced or reshaped their own identities. Together, they constructed timelines in scattered notebooks. As her hands began to shape words into a sculpture of their past, she instinctively wanted to mold a narrative that could honor their grandmother's truth while fortifying their family's future. The pressure clawed at her resolve, a mix of necessity and fear crying for clarity. As dusk chimed in, a chill crept into the studio. Ruth took a deep breath, steeling herself against the creeping doubt that threatened to fracture her focus. What about her struggles? What if she faced choices that say more about who we are today than we think? The thought tasted bitter on her tongue, but it sparked realization, strength and vulnerability interlaced in a way she had never allowed herself to acknowledge. "The struggles define her too," she finally stated. "Perhaps her battles make our victories possible." Her cousin nodded, the determination in his eyes flickering back to life. They needed to transcend the fear, view it not as an adversary but as a catalyst. Faced with the ambition of honoring their grandmother's legacy, Ruth understood it was essential to uncover all layers of her story, including the painful ones. The truths they would discover could lead them to redemption, healing, more importantly, a newfound strength. At that moment, Ruth felt anchored, powered by the potential of what lay ahead. The trees outside trembled, and the biting wind reminded her of past battles fought against the storms, both in life and art. Just as she reached for her notebook, a sharp knock disrupted the growing tension. It shattered her focus, a sudden intrusion into this delicate process. Who would be coming now, and why? The echoes of uncertainty crashed back, pulling her momentarily from the resolve she had forged together with her cousin. "What now?" her cousin whispered, eyes heavy with the same apprehension that sparked her own. The door loomed larger than before, a threshold between discovery and the unknown. "Let us find out," Ruth replied, her voice steadier than she felt inside. They had chosen to dive deep into shadows. Little did they know, the light might just find a way through. What awaited them on the other side of the door could shift everything they had already begun to uncover. Would the newcomer disrupt their carefully crafted exploration, or would they immediately become part of the skeleton key unlocking their past? Ruth cautiously stood from her workspace, her heart racing at the unexpected knock. Glancing over at her cousin, their shared apprehension locked them into a moment of silent agreement this could change everything. As she opened the door, a wave of cool air swept in, and to her astonishment, it was her estranged sister, Claire, standing on the threshold. "Ruth," Claire began, her voice unsteady, "I need to talk." The tension in Ruth's body eased slightly, replaced with a surge of curiosity and resentment. This was unexpected. "Come in," she said, stepping aside, her mind worrying. "Why now, after all these years?" Claire entered slowly, glancing at the scattered sketches and sculptures, her eyes lingering on the tree sculpture Ruth had created. "I saw your message," she explained, the weight of the past evident in her demeanor. "I wanted to understand what you were doing with the family history." Ruth blinked, uncertainty flooding her thoughts. "We're going through some old stories, trying to connect the dots about our grandmother's life," she said, gesturing for Claire to sit at the table. "It feels important." "What if you uncover things we're not ready for?" Claire asked, her voice trembling slightly. "Things our family has avoided discussing." Ruth met her sister's gaze, a mix of understanding and impatience. "Exactly. That is why we're doing this, to face the truth and see if we can heal." With their cousin still seated, absorbing the shift in dynamics, a heavy silence descended upon the room, thick with the unresolved issues lingering between the sisters. "Ruth, I've been thinking a lot about family," Claire finally said, vulnerability threading her words. "About the distance, and how it felt like we were never really close enough to talk about anything, really." Her sister's admission struck a chord within Ruth, a glimmer of hope shimmering amidst the long-held grievances. "We've all been part of this avoidance," Ruth acknowledged, surprising herself with the softness in her voice. "But we can change that. We need to." Claire exhaled, the tension in her shoulders visibly loosening. "I want to be part of this," she offered, her eyes searching Ruth's for affirmation. "Then you are," Ruth replied firmly. "Come and join us." It was a simple invitation, but it felt monumental. As Claire settled at the table, Ruth could see her cousin light up at the prospect of a more expansive collaboration. "Welcome aboard," he said with a warmth that momentarily melted the chilly atmosphere. "Thank you," Claire said, glancing at the tree sculpture again, "it's beautiful." Suddenly, their conversation transformed. Ruth shared the ideas they'd unearthed about their grandmother, threading through tales of courage and creativity, along with the shadows that had lain burdened beneath. Claire listened intently, her expression shifting from skepticism to intrigue. "I remember bits and pieces of her creativity," Claire said, her voice softening. "But it always felt overshadowed by everything else." That one comment invoked a mutual understanding, awakening a collective yearning to uncover the truths their family had shied away from for so long. "That is the thing," Ruth replied. "We don't have to continue these cycles. We can redefine who we are as a family, and unleash whatever hidden potential we have left." The weight of honesty began wrapping around the trio as they delved deeper into their grandmother's legacy, sharing old stories, memories that felt like polyphonic echoes. They each claimed pieces of the narrative, revealing their separate relationships with the matriarch who had inspired and constrained them in different ways. Ruth felt a surge of empowerment, a realization that together, they were piecing together a larger tapestry of their family. The once unbearable heaviness carried in their hearts began to morph into a willingness to forgive, to weave threads of healing that would allow their legacy to thrive. As they continued discussing the nuances of family history, Claire shared something unexpected. "I didn't know how to connect with you both because I felt left out after Mom passed." It was hard to keep pretending like everything was fine. I should have spoken up sooner. This moment of raw honesty cracked open the shield of years past, the familiarity of discomfort laying the groundwork for forgiveness. None of us knew how, Ruth responded gently. But here we are now, eager to dismantle the barriers to share our stories. They spent hours discussing, scribbling ideas and raw emotions that sprang forth in torrents. The sculpture became a visual reminder of not only their grandmother's resilience but also their own, each of them reclaiming pieces of their identities. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Ruth's heart glowed with hope. They were moving forward, learning that facing the past didn't have to mean dwelling on pain, it could foster a new, collaborative legacy built on truth and acceptance. And it was exhilarating. In that moment, Ruth grasped the profound transformation they were collectively undertaking. Each sisterly confession and cousinly collaboration forged a new existence and identity sculpted from the shared complexities of loss, hope, beauty, and redemption. It was clear now that if they continued to work together, they would not only honor their grandmother's legacy, but they would also emerge as a family ready to navigate the future. Art and legacy fused, becoming a common thread between them, one that could bind them strongly amidst life's inevitable complications. Satisfied with their progress, Ruth proposed, "Let us plan a gathering at the property. All of us. We can show our family members what we've uncovered and invite them to reclaim their connection." Claire's eyes widened, filled with something akin to excitement, mingled with unease. "Do you think everyone will be receptive?" she asked cautiously. "I believe they will," Ruth replied confidently, feeling empowered by the reconciliation they had only just begun. "This is our chance to rewrite our narrative. We must try." The three of them stood then, united in purpose. The weight of years of familial disconnect had begun to lift, leaving space for a renewed legacy, a pathway toward healing marked by their individual and collective achievements. Together, they were beginning to forge a new story filled with dreams reborn and connections rekindled, and in that moment, Ruth felt a sense of solid confidence. This was a breakthrough. With determination etched into their hearts, they embarked on a journey that promised clarity, healing, and a profound sense of belonging, forging a legacy built on newfound authenticity. Ruth had conquered her fears, embraced her true identity, and opened the door to profound growth. As they gathered their belongings, ready for their next steps, it was clear they were no longer mere echoes of their past, but vibrant voices of a legacy ready to be reclaimed. Don't wait even one more second to support this journey. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. Comment your reactions and theories about this incredible conclusion. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this transformation. This is the moment to show your support. Only true fans of personal overcoming stories understand the importance of acting now.